Hey, Motzei, Kosima,
שיפוצו מנסך
Chachutza, Motzei, Kosima. Yefutzu Isaac Chutza Motzei
Motzei
Kadima Yefutzu Motzei Kadima Yefutzu
Motzei Kosimai שיפוצו מנסך
Hey, Motzei, Motzei Kasima, Motzei Kasima. Okay, this finally works. That song, of course, I mean, when this was like one of the Rebbe's most popular songs at Farbrengens, like a lot of major Farbrengens, especially during the weekday Farbrengens, we would sing this song. And the Rebbe would also like singing it at high speed at times. He would pick it up, right? He would go. And of course, it was such an amazing, not just the song, but the saying. So do people know the background of the saying? What it is? What's going on? Does anyone know?
The famous story of the Baal Shem Tov and Mashiach.
The story is like this. If we could speak, because it's about the Baal Shem Tov. Tonight is his birthday, as we mentioned. So the Baal Shem Tov, we know so many teachings from him and about his students, especially the Maggid and the Talmud Yaakov Yosef. And there's even this amazing collection of stories of the Baal Shem Tov, known as the Shivchei HaBaal Shem Tov. Of the few things that we know is mamash from the Baal Shem Tov, and we could speak about this different things. So let's say, for example, there's the Siddur of the Baal Shem Tov that is in fact, the Lubavitch Library, and most recently they made it. I mean, it was already largely made available, but yet not every page of the Siddur was made available until just like a half a year ago, when the Chabad Library made 500,000 pages of manuscript from the library available online, including the Siddur. It's been like unleashed a whole like treasure trove, not like Nitzotzot. Some libraries, a lot of libraries have been doing that recently. Even the Russian State Library, the very library that under which officially the Chabad collection that's still in Russia is under, though it is in a Lubavitch building. There's been like this compromise worked out. But so a lot of the manuscripts and texts that are in Russia have been made available online. I mean, of course, it's not the same really being in the musty library and turning the pages and all that, but it's certainly making things available. We see that the Baal Shem Tov was called Baal Shem Tov because he was certainly a practical Kabbalist, but even more, they say he wasn't just a Baal Shem, he was a Baal Shem Tov. We're singing before a Motzei Kasimar taking it to heal the soul as much as the body. And in fact, if you look in the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov, There's some ways of his healing sounds like proto-talk therapy, and particularly because even just the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, one general unique approach of the Baal Shem Tov in all his teachings, common or meaning a general shitta of his, is the psychologicalization of Torah. That teaching Torah is not just for a good pshat, understand which it is certainly, but you could take a text of a pasuk or a Mishnah, Gemara, Medrash, and even change the pshat of it to its, maybe even its opposite meaning. So long as the teaching of applied, how it affects the person psychologically and their from their behaviorally, that it's all that it's about the human element, the human psyche part. That Torah is a guide, well, not just self-help for all, so to speak. But even though it's not just that, but you could find all the solutions and ways to deal with life through Torah. And that also, that state of the mind is not just the heart, because we all know it's about the heart. Even the mind, Chented, for example, said he had strong emphasis on the machshav, where the person is thinking, there the person is. That so it's not doesn't mean intellectual way of processing. It means awareness of mind, mental powers. Let's put it that way. And as we'll see, maybe when we share a story or two about Baal Shem Tov, how that expressed itself in his life. And you could all go to Shivchei Baal Shem Tov and mamish, you find it on every other page. And you know what they say famously about stories of the Baal Shem Tov, right? If you don't believe in any of them, you're not Bikaris. If you believe in all of them, you're a fool. So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to believe that they all could have happened. Because the part was that there was so many stories of the Baal Shem Tov on Motzei Shabbos that there were practically not enough Motzei Shabbos in Baal Shem Tov's life to have that many Motzei Shabbos stories. So some of them, therefore, must not be true. Big shaila, right? Well, it's all very apropos because officially this is all about, we've been focusing on Motzei Shabbat. In addition to, of course, all the other great, amazing stuff happening in time of the year, middle of Elul, Chai Elul, as we said. But somehow it all ties, when you're focused on some subject, then even when you're involved in other things in your life, let's say a physicist focused on like just cracks some great physics mystery, Mr. immersed in the problem to find a solution for days, weeks, and going shopping in the supermarket, he's going to see his physics quandrum in the canned beans. It's live it through it. So in a way, it's all basically that Motzei Shabbos resonates anyways every week when we learn, we find a way to see it also through the prison of Motzei Shabbos. All the more so this week, it's about Baal Shem Tov, and being the Baal Shem Tov has all these amazing connections and stories about with Motzei Shabbos and particularly Malacha Malka. In fact, there's a saying says in the Rebbe Marash of Chabad, and Lubavitch said it, and others say it too, in different versions. But that that whoever repeats the story of the Baal Shem Tov on Motzei Shabbos, it's a skula for Parnasa, right? You heard of this? So the vart is that there's 3 lav dafkas. Lav dafka, a story of the Baal Shem Tov, but it could be a story of any tzaddik. Another version I heard was that lav dafka, a story of the Baal Shem Tov, but it's something else, even like a vart or a nigga. Okay. Second lav dafka is not necessarily Motzei Shabbos, at any time of the week. And the third lav dafka, not necessarily skula for parnasa, but skula for anything that you need or wish. So usually when we would sit down for Malava Malka around the table, especially if it was like a more formal, if you invited people, friends, made them nice Malava Malka, you would open the Malava Malka with this vart about the 3 lav dafkas. The second vart you'd start over at the beginning, Malava Malka, is the even more famous vart. That which Chassidische Farbrengen can accomplish, even Malach Michal cannot accomplish. And it is connected with Malava Malka too, because in addition to Eliyahu Hanavi, there's a connection of Malach. Well, even though we say also Gavriel, Hamalach HaGaloisi, some say it's Gavriel, but really it's Michal. Hamalach HaGaloisi actually is Michal. So Michal is connected with say Shabbat. So it's implication. So you make the Malava Malka into a Farbrengen. So yeah, make it right. So that becomes that great connection. And of course, the Malava Malka, in addition to eating, you sing the Gunim and say Savart, and there was always a story, preferably of Baal Shem Tov, not from one of the Chassidish, from a Rebbe for sure. So, L'chaim.
L'chaim u'levracha.
L'chaim to the 2 luminaries, the Shnei Ma'eres, the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer Baal Shem, and to the 2 generations there after him, Rabbi Shneur Zalman V'Yadi, the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, founder of Chabad. And in fact, there is a legend that when the Alter Rebbe was 3 years old, he encountered the Baal Shem Tov, or he was brought to Baal Shem Tov, or certainly that Baal Shem Tov heard of him and made it special. Even during his meal, he said something to the effect that, there's a great luminary. There's 2 things. One legend in Chabad is that when he was born, that Baal Shem Tov said he feels that a whole new soul came down to the earth. Right? And also having to do during his Upshan, 3 years old, also. Incidentally, when the Alter Rebbe was around 3 years old, it was already written into the Pinkas, the book, the Kehila, the Katan ledger. He written down as a member of the Chaver Kadisha. And then they updated it as he was getting older. I think at 9 years old, and then by his bar mitzvah, they already are calling him like the great Talmid Chacham guy and elevate his status. But already at youth, he was signed in. So this is all leading up to what we're going to say. We were singing before a Maseh Kasi Mar which is from the most known and some would say most authentic in a way teaching or letter or writing from the Baal Shem Tov himself. It's known as the Aggeret, Aliyat, Haneshama, the manuscript of Aliyat, of the ascent of the soul. And it is, I'm just remembered, if I recall, I haven't looked it up recently in a while, that he's writing in around, let's say circa, just to translate the Hebrew year into the English year, or, secular year, let's call it, Gregorian calendar, is that it was like, okay, it was year 1746. He's writing about a letter that he wrote in 1745 that didn't reach the person, about a vision he had in 1742, Rosh Hashanah. And in that vision, he goes up, and there's various parts to it, and I highly recommend whoever wants to, has the time to read it. It's so much so that there's 3 or 4 different versions. People have written entire treatises just on this one letter. And in the letter, the Baal Shem Tov finally makes it all the way up to chamber of Mashiach, and asks Mashiach, when are you coming? When are you going to reveal yourself on earth? And to which Mashiach answers the Baal Shem Tov, when your well springs will spread out to the outside, and which is a paraphrase, I think, from Isaiah. And that is the way it's quoted, and the way the song goes. But as someone did mention here, he does add another element, which is that he should teach the certain kavanas of how to daven, how to do certain, even Kabbalistically oriented theurgic practices for people, for students. So you could read it, that the wellspring teachings, whatever teachings, but it included certainly even Kabbalistic affairs for more elitist meditators, or people that could pursue and have the mental capacities to pursue like Kabbalistic kavanas. So, and one of the main differences of the Baal Shem Tovs, especially even on a Kabbalistic level, right? The Baal Shem Tov, you have Baal Shem Tov as leader of the people, you have Baal Shem Tov this and that, but there's also Baal Shem Tov as Kabbalist, because we even have tradition of various, not just practical Kabbalah from Baal Shem Tov as we spoke, but even more like Lurianic type of kavanas, having to do with, like, let's say, mikvah of Shabbat, Arab before Shabbat, or for vidui, for confession, or for certain things that happen to one's life, or certain parts of davening. And there's different versions of the mikvah, because the Baal Shem Tov used the siddurs with the kavanas of Baal Shem Tov. That's the siddur that Baal Shem Tov in Chabad library, and includes another 1 or 2 that are, one is in another university and one in private hands. They're all 3 attributed, but the one in Chabad library seems was the most used, most authoritative. The second one of them is actually, it seems like wasn't even technically used Baal Shem Tov, was being completed by a scribe for the Baal Shem Tov to use, but it's questionable if the Baal Shem Tov even used it. Which incidentally, in that siddur is where we have one of the contemporaneous proofs. I mean, the contemporaneous proof of exactly when the Baal Shem Tov passed away, because it was a question if it was the second day of Shavuot, the first day of Shavuot. Tradition in Chabad and some others it was in the first day of Shavuot. And in the colophon of this siddur, Shapsi Reshka, Kavanas, Baal Shem Tov, Arizal's, Baal Shem Tov, you could say version of the Arizal's Kavanas. Sometimes he veered away from Arizal entirely, certain things. In the Baal Shem Tov version of Kabbalah, he so firstly he would come up with his own formulas. Second of all, he also integrated psychology, how to make it personal, not just thinking different formulas and versions. Thirdly, you see also the prominence of again of using mental powers. That's what kavanah is, psyche, and how that could actually have effect on things, prayer, transformation, what he called being mamtik words, to sweeten the negative energies. And in Shivchei Baal Shem Tov, there's even descriptions of how he would get into these states of intensity. And a lot of it sounds like he would like be standing, he would bend his knees forward and his body backwards, almost like some backwards yoga flip, if that makes sense. It's described, that's what it seems like, more than one place. And he certainly was embodied the channeling or mystical experience, or the dveikus, let's call it, when kavanas and all that. So he's very into that. But the chiddush, you could say, the Baal Shem Tov was that he simplified and downsized the Lurianic kavanas. In fact, I think if I recall, there's one or two sayings where he said that the Arizal made it too complicated, and you forget a bit of to focus on the prayer itself. And so, therefore, if you compare the Baal Shem Tov's kavanas, let's say the mikvah to the Arizal's, or in other areas, things, you'll see that Baal Shem Tov is drawing on Lurianic formulae and things, but using it in different ways, or more down, again, shortened and what have you. Like you don't have to, like if you look at the siddur of the Rashash, you would see that you have to keep on turning back. It's like full, like the kavanas take over way more than the actual davening text. So that's too much of a distraction. So it seems like this, that again. So there, we're making certain, like, what do you call it, myths or fact things. So one of them is the issue of that Baal Shem Tov wasn't that. Firstly, he existed, of course, and that he was not learned, not true either. Both in Talmudic study and in mysticism, and even philosophy, right? We mentioned Sadiqa. Thirdly, that he was challenging supernatural aspects from an early age, and also again that he practiced certain forms of Kabbalah in his way, and also that he was a teacher, not just to the common people, which of course he spent time in the marketplace and all that, but it seems like he actually was once he was revealed, he was primarily for more elitists. It's both in again, scholars and mystics or what have you. People who were known as Ovdim, people that worked on themselves. So Mamish. So this is the night of Baal Shem Tov, and also again with Alter Rebbe, like we said, Shivchei Baal Shem Tov was published from them about Baal. By the way, one last thing, just interesting about the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov, praise of Baal Shem Tov, as mentioned, it was published in 1814 or something like that. But as mentioned, it was starting to be already written and being in manuscript form, like think of like a journal, a collection of stories about someone you really admire or a leader, and then you start adding and expanding to it. So there was a manuscript found in like 1980, some bizarre story, some mysterious dentist in Brooklyn, who some young Chabad student or Bacher came across, and who happened to have some contact who just came out of Russia, brought this out. No one knows 100%. It's not clear exactly the whole chain of events. And there was not that long ago, maybe a couple of years ago, an article, I think, in Makar Rishon, which is like an Israeli journalist site online. I think you can find the story. But I remember generally here, basically 1980, the manuscript popped up. And through here and there, it wound up in the Rebbe's library. And this manuscript was, amongst other things, it had in it an early, no one had a manuscript version of Shir Baal Shem Tov even before the publication. But here was a manuscript that included like a good chunk of the Shir Baal Shem Tov, and they dated it through internal evidence of the manuscript to like the late 1770s. So that's just like with less than 2 decades after Baal Shem Tov. And already there was a whole enough of a collection of them, right? And there are some variations between the manuscript form and the printed form. The manuscript form has some more clearly less, let's call it censored, if you want to call it, form of, like, say, one person, right, discussing it like about Shabbat Tzvi, there's a story or two, or what have you, right, and a couple other things. But it seems like a more accurate text, and it did resolve certain questions they had, certain of the students of Baal Shem Tov, different events described. So as far as I know, it's still in the library on Eastern Parkway. We've been speaking about the Baal Shem Tov because it's his birthday. It was today, and we even celebrate the night thereafter. He was a holy man, such a holy man. And he said he saw the Messiah in a dream. A question is, when are you coming to hear the question? He answered, when your fountains of wisdom reach to the outside. He was a holy man.